Back okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, first, it's always nice to bring a gift, and so for each of you for attending today, Vera will send you the most complete guide to how you go about teaching and coaching the lean methodology. I think I mentioned earlier that Steve Blank is rather a perfectionist, and so as a perfectionist he has collected every syllabus, every slideshow, every video in one place in this 150, 160 page document with links to all kinds of blog posts, videos, PowerPoints for teaching, syllabuses for teaching a one-day program, a 10-day program, a 10-week program. And so we will circulate a copy of that to each of you in the next day or so, and I hope you tear it apart and use it well. So what I'd like to do now is actually a presentation I was asked to do back in, I think it was March, at the Global Entrepreneurship Congress, which is a very much like this, this room, an assembly of the people who lead or drive the entrepreneurship ecosystem. In that case, throughout the world. Here, it's only Bulgaria. And the question was around, how do I approach teaching this methodology, whether it's in an informal session, in a university setting, in a junior achievement program, or whatever. And so it's a fairly brief introduction, and then I hope we'll spend most of the time addressing your specific questions. So if you think back to the beginning of the teaching of business skills, this really is where it began. This is the Harvard University Business School, the very first MBA graduating class, the class of 1908. This class was formed because at the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, all of a sudden there were national companies for basically the first time. And because the railroad had been completed from the east to California, companies could operate across the 3,000 miles of the United States. They needed management, they needed operations, they needed skills. And so Harvard decided to launch a training program which they named the Master of Business Administration in the skills you need to work at a big company. Operations management, finance, marketing, all the things we know about. And then sort of what happened next is those were the people who also became the investors in the first startups 50 years later. And so their attitude was, sadly, that a startup is just like an established company, but it's smaller. And so all of the same techniques and management processes apply to a startup. But there's a fundamental difference between established companies and startups, and I talked about it briefly earlier. Let me just repeat it one more time, and that is, an established company is in execution mode. It knows its competitors, it knows its customers, it knows its lapsed customers, it knows its pricing, it knows a lot about its business. So when it enters a new year or a new chapter, it executes based on that knowledge. But when an entrepreneur starts a business, he or she knows almost nothing. By definition, they have no competitors because they're not in business yet. They have no customers. They don't know what the price should be or where to sell it or who will sell it for them. And so applying the Harvard Business School principles for big companies does a real disservice to a startup. I can't tell you how many board meetings I've been in where the first thing the investors want to do is discuss their 3 favorite documents that they learned in business school: profit and loss, balance sheet, and cash flow. Well, we have no revenue, so we have no profit or loss. We only have a loss. The balance sheet is just as miserable as it was last month, and there is no cash flow, there is no cash coming in. And our business is totally focused on making this idea into a business before we run out of money. And so a startup is all about experimentation, the search for the elements of the business that, when combined, deliver a repeatable, profitable, scalable business. Those 3 sort of magic words. Repeatable. If I make 10 sales calls and I get 2 orders out of every 10 sales calls, does that happen the first 10 or does it happen every 10? Until it gets to a steady state, it's impossible to predict how successful or not we're going to be, or how profitable or not we're going to be. If it's scalable, it's growable, it's got long-term potential. If I can do it in Bulgaria, can I also do it in Poland and in Czechoslovakia and in Russia, and maybe even in the United States? Can I repeat this process over and over again and build a giant business? And third, obviously, eventually, can this become a profitable enterprise? Usually not in the earliest days. And so the way, and really again, this is, think of me as, the experienced reporter reporting on 10 years in the evolution of this methodology, dedicated basically full-time of Steve Blank, because he wanted to change the way, startups were built, on the theory that, gee, this startup thing has been really good for me, it made me a very wealthy man, it's time for me to now return something to the community that has, developed my success. And so most of what we're going to talk about is not textbook learning, not lectures, but actual real experience, getting customers to fall asleep in your presentation or to say, gee, I'm not really sure that's for us, but if it could do this and that, I think everybody in our company should have that software. And for you, the entrepreneur, to take that learning, run back to the office and tell the developers, wait, we've got to add these features. This is what will really make a difference. And it's that kind of experimentation that you can sort of only read, reading about it accomplishes very little. Doing it, getting your head beat in, coming back and thinking about why did they hate it so much, and what do we have to do differently to get them not just to hate it less, but eventually to buy it. And so the entire sort of teaching regimen for customer development is really summed up in 5 words. They are the first page of the Startup Owner's Manual. They are the heart of the teaching approach, which are get out of the building. There are no customers in your office. The only opinions that matter drive the success or failure of your business are not my opinions, not your opinions, not the investors' opinions. The only opinions that matter are the opinions of the people who will eventually give you money. And so, since they're not in your office, you have to get out of the building and go and solicit their feedback long before you have anything to sell them, and use that feedback to improve whatever you eventually plan to sell them. So the most popular way to teach this is in an 8 or 10 week program, which Steve really named the Lean Launchpad. He began teaching it about 5 years ago at University of California, Berkeley, and then at Stanford. I began, I guess, 3.5 years ago teaching it at Columbia, and we use it in lots of different training programs, not just in universities, but with real startups dealing with real ideas, and real problems. And so here are just a few of the many places where the Lean Launchpad has been used. As near as we can tell, today 350 universities all over the world use the Startup Owner's Manual to teach customer development and sort of lean startup principles. We don't really have a very good idea of how many of those are doing the full semester Lean Launchpad, but our best guess is it's about half of them, so that might be 160, 180 universities all over the world. And so it starts with a team. It's basically been proven all over the world that there are almost no single founder startups, right? Where would Facebook be without Sheryl Sandberg, the sort of adult who makes sure that everything happens after the visionary founder Mark Zuckerberg has a new idea? Somebody's got to build it, somebody's got to deliver it, somebody's got to sell it. It's almost a yin-yang sort of partnership where one is off in the clouds and the other one has her feet firmly on the ground and a whip in each hand driving the machine forward. And so in the Lean Launchpad, we encourage students to enter as a team, not a single founder with an idea. Ideally, it's the pairing of what has come in the States to be called the hacker and the hustler, which if you are trying to raise money in Silicon Valley today, you almost have to present a team with at least a hacker and a hustler. The hacker is the heads down developer, the coder, the engineer, who doesn't really like human beings very much, really wants to spend all their time cuddling their computer and coding till 4, 5, 6 in the morning, and then sleeping under the desk for a few hours and coding again, right? Doesn't really like people all that much, maybe has a few friends, but is often somewhat socially impaired. And then you have the hustler, who likes nothing more than to talk to people and to get them to talk to him or to her, who likes nothing more than a sales challenge where the customer says, absolutely not, I'll never buy that. That's the one the hustler wants to sell. And when you pair those two, you have the almost perfect combination for customer development. You have one person devoted to being out of the building basically all the time, gathering feedback and learning about what people like or don't like about the product, the features, the price, the marketing, whatever. And the other one is just happily banging away building the product, often hopefully surrounded by a team of developers. And once a day or twice a week, the hacker and the hustler come together. And the hustler says, gee, I've heard from just about everybody that those features over here that you're getting ready to work on, or even that you just finished building, are of no interest, and they really want the product to add, subtract, and divide, and to store all the computations in an offline file. Okay, we can build that, good. Throw out that other code, start on this. I'm going back out to learn more. Well, now I learned that the price is too high, so can we sell more of them? Can we build it cheaper? Can we still be profitable at a lower margin on every sale? Or maybe we don't print CD-ROMs at all. We make it a download, which saves us expense and postage and production and so forth. So when you're teaching this, ideally you want to teach it to teams. So the team, typically in the Lean Launchpad, applies with an idea and a couple of resumes. The idea very often takes the form of a business model canvas, which those of you who aren't familiar with the business model canvas, I hope you'll come tomorrow. We'll talk about it for an hour or so. Basically, the business model canvas, the short story is it replaces the business plan, right? What they taught in Harvard Business School is every business has a plan. All the details are written down. It's usually 50 pages. It's usually got a bunch of spreadsheets at the back, and it usually takes 2 or 3 months to write. Customer development says, why would you waste all that time putting all this fantasy into that plan when you have no idea what the customers are going to do or what their reaction's going to be? And you can't possibly know how many transactions you're going to have in the second quarter of 2015 or how many employees you're going to have in the third quarter of 2016. So you make it all up and you put it in a document and you hope it works out. The business model canvas says, since all they are guesses anyway, why spend 2 or 3 months making those guesses so elaborate and so detailed when it's all guesses? Put them all on a single sheet of paper. The business model canvas divides that single sheet of paper into 9 boxes. Things like the value proposition, simply stated, why should people give you money for whatever you're doing? The customer segment, who exactly are the people who are going to really want to buy this product? Customer relationships, how am I going to get my customers? How am I going to keep them? How am I going to grow them? And, others like how's the revenue going to work? How are the costs going to work? Since you really don't know any of this, spend a day putting down your best guesses rather than 2 or 3 months making your guesses into these very long, painful fairy tales, so that you can get started almost immediately getting out of the building and getting feedback, from customers. When you are selecting students to participate in this program, whether it's a university program or an incubator or a JA program, you don't look too closely at the idea. Focus on the team. Does the team have the key ingredients of energy, passion, drive, will to succeed? Because almost certainly, as it starts to get feedback from customers, the idea is going to change again and again. So don't make your evaluation too much about the actual idea. Make it much more about, will that team be determined enough and open enough to feedback to change the product when, customers say they don't like this or they don't like that or they want more of this or that. I mean, if you use a simple example, Facebook. When Facebook was born, it bore no resemblance to the product that 1.2 billion people use at least once a month, right? It started as, gee, we're a bunch of geeky, nerdy guys at Harvard where there's a bunch of good-looking women. How do we get some of them to date some of us? And it was sort of like a hot or not, Facebook of the women on the campus, and gave the nerdy guys a piece of software that would say, hi, can I buy you a drink without having to look them in the eye? Right? So then change number 1 was the move to sort of more of a social platform. change number 2 was the removal of the initial Facebook requirement that you had to have a .edu address to have an account at Facebook. That simple change turned it into a multi-billion-dollar business. Right? If the team hadn't been resilient and flexible, and if Mark Zuckerberg had said, well, gee, I've only had 3 dates. I don't want to change anything till I have 3 more dates, or whatever. If he were inflexible, the greatest idea in the planet would have failed, because they never would have moved their product to match what the customers want. The other thing I encourage you to do wherever you can, and I have difficulty doing this at Columbia Business School, for example, is to get an agreement from the student that if you are coming into this class, you agree to work some number, 10 hours, 8 hours, 15 hours per week on your startup, in addition to the time you spend in my classroom. Because there is absolutely no substitute for hard work, perspiration, dedication in building a successful startup. And when you have a class where some of the people aren't doing very much and others are working really hard, the people who aren't doing much can really pull down the energy of the entire class. The next, and here is exactly where that happens. Part of the rigor of the Lean Launchpad method is that it treats the students as if they are in a real startup. And every week, the student team has to get up in front of the whole class and the teacher and the coach, say, here's what we did last week, here's what we learned that's good about our business, here's what we learned that's bad, here are the changes we are about to make based on that learning. Or we got a hint that nobody liked it very much. We want to dig deeper and find out whether it's they don't like everything, or they don't like this part or this feature or whatever. So we're going to go back out and do more out of the building interviews to validate or invalidate sort of that finding. And so in most of the programs, every week, every team gets up at the front of the room and says, hi, we're team number, and they have usually typically 5 to 8 minutes. We're team number 7, we are building, weightlessness software. So far our people are all falling to the ground, so we have more work to do on the technology. What we learned in the last week is that it's easier to create weightlessness for skinny people than fat people, so we're going to focus our marketing on skinny people so we can have greater success while we refine the technology. And these are the changes this points us to in our business model canvas. And in the next week, we're going to go out and study this or that. It's no different than the accountability you would have to investors if you got somebody's money invested in your startup. Every week or every month, you've got a report. Here's what I did with your money. Here's why your investment is increasing in value. Or here's why it's not increasing, and here's what we're going to do to fix that. You're trying to simulate the pressure and performance demands of a startup in a sort of safer, less threatening, kind of basically often academic environment. In some of the programs I do, particularly when they're sponsored by a government, we actually make each member of the team sign a contract that says, if I am accepted into this program, I will attend every class, I'll be on time every day, I will attend every meeting with my coach, and I will work either full-time or at least 25 hours a week on my startup, and if I don't, you can throw me out. Right? In other words, this is serious. In that case, the government of Colombia or Mexico or Russia is spending real money to put you into this program. It's like getting a college scholarship. You get a lot of D's and F's, and you're on a scholarship. Somebody's going to call you, and that scholarship is probably going to end. And if you are doing a startup and you're not making progress, that scholarship is going to end because you're going to run out of money and investors aren't going to give you any more. It's also important in that it really gives students a first sense of whether this life is for them or not. Because startup life is not the right career choice for many young people. They don't realize how hard it is, the pressure, the uncertainty, and so this is a way to give them a chance to experience all of that in the safety of junior achievement, or your high school, or your university, or your incubator, and let them see before they quit a job, or drop out of college, or borrow money from their parents, or take their life savings to do this. Let them understand what life is going to be like. I don't think this is a business in Bulgaria, but one of the largest flower delivery companies in the United States is 1-800-Flowers. And the founder of that started with a single flower shop. He was a counselor in a home for troubled teenage boys, and he said, gee, this is pretty horrible, and I have to work nights, and I have to sleep here a lot, and I'd like to have a better, more enjoyable career. And I heard that the flower shop in my town is for sale. So did he just run out and buy it? No. First he spent a month of working every weekend for free in the flower shop to see what it was like. And a big part of what he loved about it was the smile he got. Here, probably more from your boy. Here's the beautiful bouquet you ordered. Go give it to your wife, your girlfriend, or one for each of them, depending on how much trouble you want to get into. And he said, yes, I like this life. Yes, I'm interested in this. And that was the first sort of test before he eventually built a very, very successful business. The other thing we tried, in the back, okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, first, it's always nice to bring a gift, and so for each of you for attending today, Vera will send you the most complete guide to how you go about teaching and coaching the lean methodology. I think I mentioned earlier that Steve Blank is rather a perfectionist, and so as a perfectionist he has collected every syllabus, every slideshow, every video. Tell the students to watch that video at home, out of the classroom, and when they come to the classroom, we're going to talk about, well, what did you learn about get customers, and how do you apply it to your particular business? So they're always thinking about the application of the technology as opposed to the pure sort of academic value, if you will, of the technology itself. This is very much an applied science. At Columbia, I don't know if you are taught in high school wood shop, right? A class where you go in and you learn to make a little birdhouse, and the birdhouse is usually kind of crooked and the hole isn't exactly in the right place, and you can see where you hit the birdhouse with the hammer. But when you're done, you've learned to use a bunch of tools. And I believe that Lean Launchpad is more like wood shop or cooking class than it is like, you know, algebra or history or a more academic subject. And the closer, I mean, imagine if you went to a cooking class and all you did was read about how to make a great souffle or, you know, great goulash. How would you ever know what a great goulash tasted like if all you could do was read about it? And I think the same sort of fundamental thinking holds true when you're teaching entrepreneurship. Get your hands dirty, stir the pot, try and make the sales calls and so forth. So I don't think I want to spend much time on this, but what we often do is we encourage the startup teams to keep a blog of some sort of all of their customer interview experiences, partly so they have a record of what they've heard, but also so we as the teachers and the coaches can review that and give them feedback and maybe some insights from it as well. How many of you teach at the sort of high school level or below the college level? Okay, so let me just quickly say that the entire Lean Launchpad is probably more than most high school students can really, you know, think about. And even the entire business model canvas, it may be too much. And so what we've seen in high school or post-high school, maybe even college freshman classes, use only the right-hand side of the canvas, the stuff that involves the customer, and not the partnerships, resources, activities, the more complicated parts. Because if you don't get the right-hand side of the canvas right, you don't need the left-hand side because you don't have a business. And so, I mean, the easy way to think about it is the right-hand side is the design of the house. The left-hand side is the plumbing, the electricity, the sewer lines. If you're not going to build the house, you certainly don't have to worry about the plumbing and the electricity. And I think you should also look at some of the video tools and things like that. One of the most innovative schools doing this is the Hawkins School in Silicon Valley. And Steve has written about it extensively at steveblank.com, so you can follow it there. The other thing that is a wonderful learning experience at high school, college, and graduate school is inviting the students to give feedback to other students. It helps them with critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, gives them a certain self-confidence that they can add value to their classmates, you know, projects and so forth. And also encourage them to adopt mentors from the business world. Give them a chance to experience having, you know, conversations with professionals. Maybe learning that you shouldn't wear the jeans with the hole in the knee and your favorite rock band t-shirt if you're going to meet the head of operations at a big, you know, company here in Sofia. And I think the other thing that, particularly when you're teaching younger students, is you're not really just teaching entrepreneurship. You are teaching lots of really important life skills, like problem solving, like how to look somebody in the eye and have a peer-to-peer conversation, how to convince someone of your opinion, which might be, you ought to buy my product. You know, how to deal with objections. These are skills that any high school student should be cultivating, whether she's going off to be a hairdresser or a CEO, right? And so don't think about teaching this at the lower grade levels as purely about, I want to teach them to be Mark Zuckerberg. Think about all the values you are transmitting in the education, not just, the sort of entrepreneurship starts. So the first step in this process is to think about what kind of entrepreneurship you're actually teaching. Too many, in my personal opinion, too many entrepreneurship programs are only focused on the next Facebook, the next IPO, the next Google, which is a ridiculous ambition to establish in almost all of your students, right? In approximately 3 out of 10,000 startups get to either $100 million in market capitalization or IPO, right? So you are basically encouraging your students to build a rocket that will land on the moon and open a McDonald's and fly back to Sofia Airport. The chances of them being successful are so minute that you really want to give them more reasonable objectives, more reasonable expectations. And the other reality is that if they have a more modest set of objectives, obviously the chances of success are much, much higher, right? 4 out of 5 businesses fail to reach, regardless of size, a taxi company, a pizza restaurant, fail to reach their 5th birthday. But that means 20% of them will. So help the student in the beginning think about whether he or she wants to be independent, have their own business, without regard for whether they're going to be a billionaire someday. They just want to be the boss, they want to control what they do, they want to do something they love, and so forth. The only place I've seen this done really well is actually the Mexican government has 3 separate entrepreneurship programs. One, which I teach, is for what they call the high achieving startups, the ones that want to be Facebook. There's a program in the middle for established companies that are trying to figure out how to grow. And the third one, which is the most beautiful, is so you want to start a small business. What are the elements of making that business successful, right? Small business, by definition, is going to feed you and your family and enable you to maybe buy a home if you're reasonably successful, send your kids to college if you're reasonably successful, and maybe, when you're ready to retire, you'll be able to sell it for some sum of money. But it's not designed for an IPO or for a $100 million sale to HP or something. So you want to think about which level you're teaching. And there is, in my view, the skills are largely the same. The courage, the risk tolerance, the innovation, the problem solving, the skills are basically the same. But you're giving people a more reasonable chance, of hoping or aspiring to succeed if you help them think about adjusting their sort of goal or their trajectory. And realistically, most big startups start out as successful small companies anyway. So if my ambition is to own the finest pizza restaurant in Sofia, and it does really well, I can open a 2nd and a 3rd and a 10th and a 20th and 1,000, as many successful restaurateurs, have done. So it's an important difference that I think we've lost all sight of in the United States, that everybody has to be Facebook. Everybody has to be an internet bazillionaire. It's just a little ridiculous, and we know the market can't possibly accommodate that many new ideas, new businesses, and so forth. So step 2, I've sort of talked about all. So first, figure out what you're teaching and what you are using to describe the ultimate definition of success as a result of achieving success in your program. Second, focus on, this is not a business yet. This is the beginning of a search for something that might become a business. And so your job as the founder is to ask questions and to learn about what are the components that make this successful. Your job as an educator or a coach, is to make sure that they are asking the questions the right way, make sure they have access to the right people. Very often young people will need help if they're building a piece of financial software. They need help, introductions to people in the finance community to find out whether they think their idea is any good or not. That's where coaches and mentors and teachers can help. And last, help them think through the conclusions they're drawing from the feedback they get. That's where you can play an important role. Well, for example, a few weeks ago, somebody told me about a new piece of software he had developed to measure the noise in college dormitories and to allow the people in room 206 to anonymously complain about the people in room 306 who were playing loud acid rock till 4 o'clock in the morning. And they went out and they showed it to 15 universities, to the person in charge of the student residences, and every one of them said, wow, this is a great product, we'd like to get it, but we can't buy it this year, our budget is closed. And these guys came back and said, look at this, everybody wants to buy it. And as their coach, I said, well guys, the software costs $750. The university budget is tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. What they really did was they gave you a very polite no with lipstick and earrings on it, right? They found some excuse to not come up with $750 for something they said was wonderful. So you need to go back again and say to them, will you install it and test it and pay in a year if it does the job for you? Or, go back and say, gee, what could I possibly do? In other words, dig deeper, because you're not really properly evaluating the feedback. That's where you play a vitally important role, is adding your experience and wisdom to the process of doing this kind of search. And the search, or the sort of what we call customer discovery, drives this entire process. The feedback is what drives the development of the business. Step 3, don't please teach business plan writing. It's, as old as communism and even less popular, and it wastes tons of your students' time and creativity. Get them to put their ideas on a piece of paper in a day or two, and then edit those ideas with them. Ask them questions about, well, why do you think it should be this price and not that price? Why do you think this will sell in retail stores? Usually this kind of product is sold online. Use the canvas as the beginning of a conversation. And also you'll find in this educator's guide we'll send you, there's a 30-minute video by the developer, pioneer of the canvas, Swiss PhD Alex Osterwalder, a 30-minute video where he talks about it and how you use it and how easy it is and so forth. I talked about, focus on the right side of the canvas. Then I think the other thing that's really critical is to get them out of the classroom, get them out of the building. In a high school, that can be against the law, it can be a problem. In a college, it's less of a challenge, but force your students to make real face-to-face interviews and to come back and report on what they've learned. And then sort of almost the last step is your role is to, when they come back all defeated and, oh gee, this is a terrible idea, nobody likes it, give them a hug and let's talk about what you heard. Let's see if any parts of it they really liked, and is there a way to sort of focus the business on the part that everybody liked and sort of drop the other part. Same time, you've got to bring the whip. And guys, you only did 3 interviews in a whole week, you know, get out there, do it. You got to really, you know, move this. And then give them as much of your own sort of knowledge and experience as you can. When you're recruiting mentors and coaches to work with your teams, you want to avoid people who just want to tell the students how great they are, how much they knew. Oh, when I was a young entrepreneur, I did this. You want people who really want to teach the way you want to teach, who are willing to share knowledge and really focus on that team's issues and problems, not tell stories about how they built their, you know, meat packing business sort of over time. The other thing to think about is to use some of the online tools to do a lot of the teaching sort of online rather than face-to-face, so you use the face-to-face time for more personalized feedback, interaction, and so forth. In quite a few countries, either organizations like Junior Achievement or universities have translated all of the Udacity courses into the local language to make it easier for the students to understand. So it's in Russian, it's in Latin Spanish, it's in Castilian Spanish, it's in French, it's in Polish, and all of this stuff is public domain. There's no advertising, there's no charge. And so if a group of you want to do a wonderful service to the, you know, young entrepreneurs of Bulgaria, it's a lot of work. It's 9 30-minute videos, but either putting subtitles on there or redoing the audio track can be a great way to expand the reach of this methodology, you know, to lots more students. And I think the other thing is that both as a teacher and more important as an entrepreneur, this is tough to do. It's very hard to find a successful niche of a business opportunity, to get the product right, to get the marketing right, to get it out there, to get revenue before you run out of money. And so, you know, I said earlier, you've got to cuddle them and hug them and encourage them. It's really a very important part of what you do. Because very often what will happen when you send your students out of the building to get feedback to their idea, the feedback the first or second time is terrible. Well, gee, I already solved that problem with this piece of software or with this product or that product. You know, I don't really think I need another one. They can come back in terrible despair. And that's when you got to pick them up and, okay, come on. You know, if you're really an entrepreneur, we're going to solve this problem. Let's talk about how we're going to solve it. Let's think about what exactly we heard and from what kinds of people and so forth. Sometimes you discover quickly that men hate it and women love it. In one of Steve's first trials of this methodology, they found that the product had 2 distinct markets that made no sense whatsoever. It was teenage girls and their mothers. Both loved the same digital product for very different reasons. There is almost nothing on this planet that teenage girls and their mothers both love. It makes no sense. But in this case, it did. So stop marketing to men, stop marketing to single adult women, focus on teenage girls and their mothers. Made the marketing instantly about 3 times as efficient as it was before they figured that out. Some people might have said, gee, the whole world doesn't like our product. You don't need the whole world to like your product. You need a focused audience that you can maximize your marketing activity against, so you're reaching them cost effectively. And you need them to get so excited about it that they market it for you by telling their friends and so forth. And then, I think this might even be it's just about the last slide. Anyway, there is a wealth of free tools out there to help you do all of this. The Udacity online classes, there's another set at Udemy. There are hundreds of PowerPoints and videos which you'll get from us in the next day or two. So don't feel like you need to invent this stuff. We've been doing it for 5 years. Steve's been doing it for almost 15. And, we feel like the proud parents of this incredible startup revolution. I hope that, in this brief kind of conversation, I've gotten some of you enthusiastic about thinking of new ways you can teach it and drive it sort of as well. So in summary, remember that we're talking about search. We're talking about figure out what makes this business a business, not rush out and do it. Second, you want to push your teams to work on something that's unique, that's distinctive, that stands out from the competition. Third, wait for the business plan. Sure, if you're ready to raise $3 million, you need a written down formal business plan, because nobody's going to give you $3 million without a very clear indication of what you're going to do with their money. Fourth, get out of the building, get them out, chase them out. Go with them on the first interview or two is sometimes a great thing for a teacher or a coach to do. Lay back, let them lead it, and don't interrupt them and don't sort of correct them. But the most important thing you do in that exercise is in the 15 minutes after. So listen, when we were in there, you were really sounding more like a saleswoman than a customer discovery person. We were there to learn, not to sell. So when we go on our next interview, I don't want to hear any more selling. It's a very difficult thing for entrepreneurs to accept because they always want to sell. So, go with them as an observer with a half a step back and then beat them up after the thing and encourage them, to improve. And then, of course, be there, as most of you are doing this because a big part of what you love is to be there for your students, and they're failing when they're falling, to pick them up, give them a hug, and get them going again. So, I'm out of slides. Now we have the more important part of talking about what you'd like to talk about. How many of you are teaching some of the lean methodology? Either how many teaching Canvas? Okay, everybody, just keep your hands up for a minute. Look around, everyone. These are the people to reach out to when you need help thinking about how you're going to teach the Canvas the first time. How many are teaching sort of customer discovery? Get out of the building, get customer feedback. Okay. So these are your sort of local coaches for the coaches. Make them work hard. I suspect from having met several of them, they'll be more than happy to share their experience with you. What else?
Can I have a question?
Please.
I work for SAP and we are using there the methodology called design thinking. Have you heard about it? It's more or less what you just described, it just maybe another name. I was just curious. It's all about going out and talking to customers and getting your feedback and your prototype before your actual product.
Yeah.
So it's more or less.
Yeah, I mean, personally, there are 25 flavors of this methodology, and I think that as long as it's all about getting the feedback from the customers and evolving the business based on that feedback, I personally don't care whether you use ours or theirs or, lean startup. It's such a they all represent such a fundamental difference from the old way, the Harvard Business School way, and they all have impact. The other thing I was going to say is that just as customer development has roots in design thinking and sort of lean manufacturing, many of these sort of methodologies overlap considerably. And so if it's get out of the building, get the feedback, drive the feedback into the product, I think that's all that matters. What flavor you use doesn't matter as long as you're enjoying, using the ice cream. Right? Someone else? Yeah.
Well, my question is, I have a few, but I'll ask just the one that I think is more important. Here in Bulgaria, I think we have, probably due to a few generations of socialist rule, we have somehow lost the entrepreneurial drive and impulse in people. So I was wondering just how could you create and foster such an entrepreneurial mindset if you have a nation that's not so risk-taking oriented?
Well, I think there's no substitute for having heroes. Celebrating those heroes. In other words, I am certain there are some very successful Bulgarian startups. In fact, we had dinner with I think one, maybe one and a half of them just last night. And you should make them the sort of, call them economic heroes, make them visible, reward them, recognize them, celebrate them, and that alone will be inspirational to others to try. And I think the other important element is to, wherever possible, certainly as teachers, but also in programs and award ceremonies and things like that, to acknowledge that failure is not a terrible thing, and it's part of the mix that, evolves certain successful companies. In other words, take the sting or the pain away from failure and celebrate the success, but there's no sort of magic answer. I mean, if you, I have resisted for 25 years people begging and trying to bribe me to move to Silicon Valley. When you live in Silicon Valley, you can't talk about your bike ride, your skiing, the weather, your girlfriend, your wife, your children. It's all startups all the time. It's truly, in my opinion, insane. But what you have there is a sort of culture of hero worship for the, oh gee, I drove by Mark Zuckerberg on the highway, he was driving his cool hot car, or, I was in the elevator with Sheryl Sandberg or John Doerr, and so there's this army of inspirational heroes. I sure, have them here as well. Get them out of the closet. Get them up at the front of this room instead of sitting in the room. Get them on the TV shows and radio and webcasts that I've been interviewed on, and make them available to inspire the next generation of Bulgarian entrepreneurs. What else? Yeah.
My name is Ina Dimitrova from Global Markets. First, let me thank you for the great lecture. What we have learned here is not lectured in schools and universities. So my question is, do you think that the education systems of the modern world are in need of major reforms, as they do not prepare young people for what is to come in life?
Wow, that's a big question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm really qualified to answer that, but I would give you my personal opinion, which is that, first of all, and again, it's much more biased, I think, toward my, United States exposure. I remember when my younger brother was about to go to college, he had a friend, Joel, who lived in our apartment building. And Joel was not the brightest guy in the building, probably wasn't the brightest, he was a lovely, intelligent young man, but clearly not a star. And when he and my brother, who were in the same grade, were talking about going to college, Joel said, well, I've talked to my parents, and I've decided college isn't for me. I'm going to move to Florida, and I'm going to enroll in construction equipment operator training school. I'm going to learn how to drive bulldozers and steam shovels and things like that. Joel, 30 years later, was happy, successful, had a house, married, and he did what was right for him. And I think we're at a point, at least in the United States, where a traditional four-year college is not as helpful to as many students as maybe it was 20 or 30 years ago. And that college is viewed much more now as sort of guiding you toward a profession. And some of this is a result of the sort of global recession where there are far fewer jobs. So if you graduate from college having majored in philosophy or history or psychology, not a lot of not a lot of companies looking to hire philosophers. So I think there's a changing dynamic. In the U.S., we have many more two-year colleges that are doing specific, physician's assistant or, nursing or restaurant management, specific skills that are in demand in the market today. In terms of entrepreneurship, I think that, you can only teach the tools. You can't teach the passion, the commitment, the dedication. And so somewhere you need to first be sure that you have a really dedicated entrepreneur before you invest years of his or her time in a program, knowing that they don't have the commitment to really use those tools at 2 o'clock in the morning and then get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and pull the tools out of the tool chest again and do it again. But I think there are more academic scholars than I who could probably give you a much better answer to that question. But I think we're seeing real change in, the educational system to point people to places where they can earn a living, which has become increasingly challenging. in the U.S., there's also a wonderful push in a variety of programs as early as 3rd and 4th grade to get women to really pursue science, technology, engineering, and math, which were always seen as boy, careers, which is ridiculous. And so in the early years, courses to get a better balance in some of those areas. Big programs at big companies like Apple and Google, where 90% of the employees and 98% of the top management are men. It's, ridiculous, and needs both education and programming to bring about change. So another, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Krista, nice to meet you. And currently I'm teaching the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People from Stephen Covey. And I'm working both with managers, with adult people, and with teens. And the question was exactly about passion and dedication. As I'm not teaching entrepreneurship directly, but I have to make people enthusiastic about leadership and doing whatever. The question was, yes, you can't really teach them to be passionate and dedicated, but how can you keep it? I mean, very often what happens is you're really inspired, you want to do something, but yeah, 2 days later you just get up and you don't want to do it. So how can we keep this passion, dedication, and how can we reinforce it when it's there?
Well, I think reinforcing it when it's there is sort of easier with, celebrating small victories and with sort of peer-to-peer recognition and things like that. How you get someone to consistently, apply themselves to any task, whether it's making change in a hamburger restaurant or designing new software, I don't really think that's often achievable. I mean, if, there used to be a funny sign in offices in the U.S. announcing our new employee motivation program. Work hard or get fired. Okay? So in a big company, it's sort of easy to enforce, you will do 8 hours of work every day, and stuff like that. In a startup, it's very hard to hide, right? It's a small team, you're counted on to do your job, and in most cases, in startups with less than 10 or 20 people, there's really no place to hide. You are either rowing your oar on the boat, or the boat is going in circles. Everybody knows who's at fault. But I mean, it's a terrible thing to say, but I have a 60-year-old brother who hasn't worked an 8-hour day in years. He's just too tired, too depressed, basically, in my view, too lazy. And the only good thing you could say about it is he married well. A woman who works hard, makes a lot of money, and for some strange reason tolerates this guy. I have tried everything you can imagine to motivate him. Like, do these 5 things and I'll give you X thousand dollars. Or start this company, I'll invest in it, you don't have to pay me back until you are making a real salary. That's not something we can teach. That person even needs to be in fact, I've seen more than a few cases where friends of mine had, in this case mostly young sons, 18, 19 years old. One that was drinking beer all day and didn't work very much. Another one was doing worse things. For a lot of them, the best outcome was to go into the military. for a couple of years, where you really can't hide, and where you learn what responsibility is and what being accountable to your boss and to your peer group is. One of these young men who I've known since he was running around the Christmas tree in diapers was one of the worst with the drinking and smoking pot and not doing a damn thing. And he, on his own, went and joined the U.S. Navy without his parents even pressuring him. He said, I got to do something. I'm in this terrible spiral. I got to snap out of it. 5 years later, he came out of the Navy about 5 years ago. Today, he is a sales manager of this network security software company. He wins every award. He has a team of 7 or 8 people now. He started as a bottom of the, he figured out that the way you, he now has a wife and a baby and a house and a nice car. He figured out if you want all those things, you don't get them from drinking beer and smoking pot. My brother hasn't figured that out yet in 40 years of experimentation. So those are difficult skills for us to deal with. And we have to teach to the teachable, sort of. Yeah, one over here, then we'll come back to you. Yeah.
Okay, so So what I was thinking is, and I wanted to ask you from your perspective, for me personally, entrepreneurship should be focused on small local problems, or at least I think what Bulgaria, or like this is only my opinion, is that we need to encourage young people to solve local problems. Like to show students that if you want to make a bakery for special bread, this is a problem worthy to start doing it. And from your perspective, because for example in Bulgaria the funds that are funding ideas, they usually fund only web projects, or for example some projects that are for example web oriented, but not a new cleaning company for Ruse, or I don't know, they don't fund this kind of project that solve local problems.
Sure.
And that's probably because of this, how to say, change of the focus on the big ideas. Like, if you're not Facebook, if you don't think to become Facebook, we don't fund you. For example, do you think that entrepreneurship changed from, this is basically solving problems, to some, how to form it like that? Do you think that if we focus on only great, and if we show only the great entrepreneurship, we would discourage the people who would like to start something small that will solve local problems? And how do you think is now allocated this, and how it should be for you? I mean, do you think now it's too much for we'll finance only Facebook, and it should be more like we'll finance Ivan who wants to make a...
Yeah, no, I think it's a very, very important, interesting issue, and I think that we get too excited about the Facebook, and all the millionaires and billionaires it created almost overnight. And yes, there will be a few of those every year, but there are lots of opportunities, and I guess I start that conversation from, why are you being an entrepreneur? If you're being an entrepreneur to be rich, that's a bad, bad reason, because the odds of you getting rich are so low. If you're doing it to be your own boss, to be in charge of your hours and your responsibilities, to build something that's yours, that you can be proud of, to have more challenge than you would have in a normal job, in a daily job at a bank or whatever, those are the right reasons. And so whether you are cleaning sewers in a new, more efficient way or baking bread, we should be as supportive and enthusiastic about those kinds of entrepreneurs, absolutely, as we are about the next stupid smartphone app. I mean, right, there are 120, I forget, some ridiculous number, I think it's 120 million smartphone apps. Do we really need 10% of that number number one. And number two, how many of those entrepreneurs will eventually get any meaningful reward? The other thing is that a key ingredient in entrepreneurship is doing something you love to do. So if you love baking bread at home and you have a special recipe that's just, you know, smells great, tastes great, less calories, whatever, why would you do something else in your startup other than do something you love? Because it's going to be hard enough no matter what the business is. So at least if you get up every morning and say, wow, I love going to work. Yeah, we're not going to make any money this month, but that's okay. We're not doing that terrible, and I'm having fun at work every single day, and I don't have to talk to that stupid boss anymore that I had when I worked over at that other company. Those, to me, are the reasons to be an entrepreneur more than how much money I might make if I hit it big. Because the odds of hitting it big are very low. And the other thing is, many of those businesses that you described are a lot harder to do than to throw up some simple website and buy some AdWords or some social media and see if any money comes. You know, that's easy unless you're really doing something truly extraordinary or unique. So.
Bob, maybe to give the chance to our participants for one last question because we have to finish.
Okay, that young lady's had her hand up for quite a while.
Okay, I'm okay, totally agree with whoever question, but the last one.
Yeah.
Maybe the junior achievement question, Ellie.
Because yesterday we met and we talked, I'm sorry, and you said that an entrepreneur needs a good mentor. In this room right now, we have people that are mentoring our startup companies in the high school and in the university. So my question is for you, can you give them more advices, how to be more useful for the startup companies when they work with them? That's my question to you, from your point of view.
Well, I mean, I could talk about this for 2 hours, but let me,
Oh no, but we have like 3 minutes.
Let me tell you the way I do it, because I'm face to face with about 600 or 800 startups a year for a 20-minute or half-hour one-on-one conversation. And I have to have a sort of common way of encountering each one, so that they all sort of, you know, here's what I want to talk about, here's how I look at them. So I look at them 2 ways. First, I own 100% of their company, but each of the members of the team has a 3-year employment contract that I cannot terminate. So this is my team, but it's my company. What do I, from the bottom of my heart, think I want to do with what is essentially my money, right? In other words, right in my mind, when I'm looking at it, I own 100% of the company. What would I do if this was really my money at risk? Then I go to my second statement, which I say to every one of these teams, right? And like in the university, I say, okay, I'm going to give you some ideas now. You get no bonus points for listening to anything I say, and no demerits, no punishment for ignoring it all. I'm going to toss out some ideas from my bag of experience and mistakes, and I encourage you to explore them and think about them and maybe do some of them or test some of them. But at the end of the day, this is your company, not my company. So because Professor Bob said do this, that's the wrong reason to do it. You're the boss, you got to stay the boss. And so I think that's sort of a very good way. It worked wonders for me, and I would encourage you to see if it works for you in your own sort of coaching and teaching style. The other thing I would do is I try to look at every business through 3 boxes on the canvas. I throw away the other 9 in these evaluations. The value proposition. Why should somebody give them money? Number 1. Number 2, who is that somebody? Can I clearly identify that it's left-handed teenage girls who are playing sports in high school? Those are the ones who should want to give this company money. And then number 3, the box called customer relationships. How am I going to find them? How am I going to get them to give me the money? And if they give me the money, how will I keep them happy and grow my business with them? And to me, those are the first 2 steps in building a successful business. The first is what we call product market fit. I know who the customer is, I know what I'm offering that customer, and not all the time, but at a predictable rate, when I show this value proposition to this customer, 20%, 30%, 16% of them buy, and I can operate profitably that way. So that's the sort of short, I guess, answer. But I was actually pointing to the lady seated right in front of you, who's had her hand up for about a half hour. So if we can take one more question.
I'm Lydia Kristova. I just want you to tell some words about the motivation to work in Bulgaria, because I'm an owner of a small business. It is in the medical field of diagnostic and prevention in the medicine, and it is a challenge to work in Bulgaria. I'm surviving about 23 years with this business. Now the last 5 years we have really the challenge to make our own medical center with my husband, and that's what I want to give you as an idea. Have you ever heard the news every day on the TV, the newspaper, and the whole atmosphere which is in Bulgaria? Because you have spoken about the motivation in the Silicon Valley, about the hero worship, and about what they speak to each other, and how they are motivated to do business and to develop and to be a hero. Here in Bulgaria, please advise and coach our politicians first. Second, our journalists. They are in the home media, TVs and newspapers to make the atmosphere, to raise like a hero, and to have the challenge to make your own business. And after that we would have the opportunity to really take the risk, because it is very, very important thing. And thanks God, and thanks my love to my work, I have survived until now with this business. That's why I'm very glad to hear you, to hear your motivation and all the things which could motivate everyone. But with me, we need this positive atmosphere in Bulgaria.
So, thank you for that. I'm not sure I really heard a question in there.
This is not a question, this is a proposal and idea from my side.
So I think the 2 things, though, that I would sort of take away from that, first is we should all remember that, no matter how gloomy the economic news is, and it's gloomy in the US and it's gloomy in Western Europe and Eastern Europe, startups really operate way underneath that, right? You can open a fabulous ice cream store in Sofia with the best tasting, freshest ice cream and the happiest, cheeriest scoopers, and make a ton of money no matter how horrible the economy is. Because everybody's always interested in better, more fun, more exciting, more tasty ice cream, right? So there is always room for another successful entrepreneur, even in the worst, sort of depression, recession, whatever. And I think the other thing is that so much of what you need to focus your entrepreneurs on is how do they build an idea that really stands out from the competition, that really gets people talking about it, that gets them introducing it to their friends, not for a coupon or a discount, but because they have discovered something great that they believe in, that they think their friends will enjoy. And those are achievable regardless of economic situation. They're not easy. They take many failures often along the way, many iterations, or as we call them, pivots, changes. But they're happening every day, and hopefully with your help, there'll be lots more of them here in Bulgaria. So thank you very much. It's been a great